So we've got 10 principles of play, 5 in possession and 5 out of possession, but we're going to look at the in possession ones here. The first one, or the first word we've got, is penetration. So this is basically looking to play through, around, or over the opposition to progress us forwards. And it's not always a pass. This can be completed by a dribble or a ball carry as well. We've then got creating space, which is all about making the pitch big. So this might be your players getting into high, wide, and deep positions. You've then got movement, which is all about changing your position to receive, or it might actually be creating a movement to make space for others within your team. Providing support, which was another one that come up in the chat. I've just seen Matt put that, support. So this is all about being an option, whether that's in front, alongside, or behind a teammate, to maintain possession, to find that opportunity to then go and penetrate to play forwards. And then finally, we've got creativity, which is all about using individual skills or combining with teammates to create them moments of magic. So I'm seeing the little like step overs, or it might be the little 1-2. So when I think about combinations, I always think about that goal that Arsenal scored. I think it was Jack Wilshere, wasn't it, all them years ago? That's one image that sticks in my head when I hear the word creativity. Now, one thing that's really important is we've used some language there that might not actually be applicable for the players that you're coaching. So it's all about how you can scaffold the language or change the language that you're using so it's more suitable for the players that you're working with. So what I mean by this is I might not use the word penetration with my players because they might not understand that word. So I might change that in terms of playing forwards or progressing up the pitch, something that's going to link to where they are in their current age and stage and their development journey. So the first thing we're going to look at now is in the first image, we're looking at on the ball. So if we look at the image, we can see the player on the ball is actually probably looking to penetrate, to play forwards, to progress. Now, when we draw our attention and we look around the ball, we might see something slightly different. So in the next image, what we're seeing now is the players highlighted in light blue there are potentially looking to support the player on or in possession of the ball. So that's just basically how we can look at on, away, and around the ball and how that might underpin what principles are happening. The next one we've got is all about looking at almost away from the ball. So it's the same image again that you've just seen, but now we're almost looking at the two widest players. They're looking to create space through the width that they're producing. And then we've got the height and depth between the goalkeeper and the highest player and the distance they're looking to produce there. You've got elements of creating spaces we touched on between the two widest players, creating that almost like 50 meters between the two of them. You've got elements of movement within the video clip around staying away and moving into the space to allow you to support the person on the ball, as we're seeing here. And then with this, as this is happening, you've almost got the movement still being produced to allow that penetration to play through units. Yet again, elements of movement away from the player on the ball to create them space to drive into. And then there'll be elements of creativity like we've seen in the first clip, where it's the step overs that allow us to get that final pass into the attacking third to create that goal scoring opportunity.
The first one I've chose is just a simple 2v1 attacking one way, looking at bringing the defender in, how you can pick them off to penetrate and go forward. So the penetrate in this one is the biggest thing. Depending on where the defender positions themselves, how are you going to go up the pitch, attack the 3 gates that are available? Is it a 1-2? Is it the defender staying away? And that all depends on how much space we create, what's our movement like. Also, we've got to give an objective to the defender to make it realistic. So if the defender wins it, you can say, right, can you dribble past the 2 defenders to the opposite line and keep that player engagement? Because we see a lot of sessions where we concentrate so much on the attacking and we do 2v1 and the defender just loses that engagement. Here I've progressed it where then you've got 2 defenders, 1 at each box, and you've got an end zone. So you take the 2 side gates away, I would do, and then you're looking at a different creative space, different angles of passes, looking at providing support in different ways. And you could even go one way, turn back round the other, and come straight back down. Use like an offside line to make it realistic. So the realism again, about the relevance, realism and repetition. is important, depending on what obviously age the kids are and the stage they're at. And then with this, I would also then bring in to make it a 3v3. And then obviously the task gets tougher. And so that penetration becomes harder. The creating space as an individual. So you might have to run him off and check and find different ways of creating space. Your movement might have to be an angled run. And where do you need support? So you might have to have when you're playing the 3v3, you might have to have a little bit more depth from the middle player to bring them onto you, to give yourself a bit more time. And then obviously the creativity will be a lots of 1v1s. What we would do is have an end zone at one end for the defending team to attack in. So they've got something to go to. And then it's a 3v2 in one section. So working on what you've just done in the last bit, to create some space to penetrate the line, to go forward. You could pass it into that into the attacking players, or you could dribble in like it shows here, and then you're going into a matched 4v4. To make it tougher, you could get one of the attacking players to recover past that line as well. So when you're building up, the things I would talk about in terms of creating spaces to the attacking players would be, can you three get between the back four? So it's harder for you to get picked up. Then we would talk also about the 3v2. How much space do you need? Where do you need to be? Can you make it big? You could also drop into the end zone to make that space bigger if you wanted to make it easier for the players.
He says, I think sometimes it's hard to get children at young ages to understand small details in regarding to space and spreading out. Is there any information you might give there, Pat, to support Jake with his coaching?
I think then that depends on the space that you're giving the players to play in. So depending on your level of player, you would make this bigger or smaller. And then you would say, right, make the pitch big. So how much room do you need for that defender not to cover on you? So in terms of, is the area that we've given 10 yards or 5 yards? So it's all important depending how much success you want. And then as the weeks go on, you might shorten that distance to make it more difficult, because you're looking across it and you're observing when you're going around going, well, this is a little bit easy, or this is a little bit too hard. And that challenge is down to the coach to judge and to see where the players are at. So, and you also might make it a bit of a competition where then you're matching up some of the players that might not need, you might have a big pitch down one end and a smaller pitch down the other and make it more difficult. So I would do it probably in blocks of like 6 to 8 minutes. You could do it less depending how intense it was, but you could have different start positions. So it doesn't always have to start at the top where with the yellows. It can start with the keeper, and you could do it as a building out session and a pressing session for the yellows, and have different start positions. So what's really key is not having like like 10 balls where the end zone is and just going, right, you always get it, because then the defenders become less engaged. So you go, right, we're going to have 5 from that side and 5 from that side. And then you're giving them different problems. And then about co-coaching. So if there was 2 of you working on this, you'd be like, you work with the defenders, I'll work with the attackers. And then how does that work in terms of how we coach our players individually and collectively? We might go up to one of the players and just say, have a look at this. Can you get between that? How are you going to create space there? What's your movement going to be if he goes or she goes there? So co-coaching is really important, rather than someone just dominate the session. Work together if you've got that opportunity. It's really important.
Kind of, why would we revisit a session or repeat a skill to support a player's development? So obviously players from all ages up to adults, we know this, it's a bit more sciencey, but it creates neural pathways. So the more we do it, the more our brain can connect, and that's more of the real science part of that. But then it's also starting to build connections too. So the biggest one here that I wanted to add is children or adults might then think about kind of seeing those pictures and building those connections. I've been in this situation before. But then it's really important to ensure the language that you use to communicate maybe the principles of play, they're also consistent, because those players can start to build that connection of, oh, I've heard that, so I know how to relate that maybe into maybe a match or maybe into a more challenging session. And then also obviously improve retention. The more we do something, we're more able to retain that information, and that's kind of any age as well. And also ultimately it enhances the player's performance. So it improves the speed we process. A player might process something they might see in the game, and we always want, and we always go on about this, we want players to make quicker decisions. So how can we get players to make quicker decisions if we don't give them opportunities to keep repeating that?
When you're planning your sessions, think of the sizing is really important, and what the end, like you said about the equipment, is it a goal? Is keepers in the goal? For instance, that makes a big difference. Sometimes we haven't got keepers, so we have big goals, and then people shoot from anywhere and things like that. So all them little bits make a massive difference to how your session outcomes are going to be. So yeah, I mean, it's just looking at different ways to challenge your players. And I think the observing bit as a coach is really important. Just standing back and looking, is this really working? What can I put into it? Can I put an offside line in? Do I make it bigger? Do I put an end zone in? Do I put a target goal in? Do I make them numbers more matched up? All them things should be going through your head to get out the best outcomes of the session, really.
I'm quite a big believer in, allowing players to kind of problem solve themselves in the sessions, because when it comes to match day, we can't go stop the game and kind of help the players and give them solutions. So allow your players to be able to problem solve. I'm not saying that you leave them and it's like they've got to try and work out themselves. You might drop in little solutions and go, look, this might be an idea. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the players on the pitch make the decisions. So if we don't allow them to do it in training, then we can't really expect them to do that in a game. I don't know if you guys want to add anything on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and it's how you basically maybe do that at training as well. Instead of, do you almost set up certain blocks to let them almost play the practice or understand the practice, for them to problem solve what's happening. So when it relates to their game later down the week, you're not always there to give the key messages, are you? So you're almost embedding the messages across the training week, across your training program, I suppose, but almost setting up them challenges where players have almost got the freedom to go and see what they can do and almost solve the problems that you put in front of them, instead of giving them all the solutions all the time.
Definitely. And I think you also see obviously other outcomes in terms of maybe the psychological side of players as well. Who's maybe that player that's going to lead in that moment and help maybe problem solve the situation? And you actually then get to understand your players a bit more, so their psychology a little bit and who your leaders are. When attacking, it kind of looking at they're creating space, they're penetrating, providing support, and they're recognising pitches, which they might be able to do that into kind of the match play. Maybe you might do at the end, because they might be working in wide areas, a 2v1. So how do they overload? And they've started to create those pitches. So think about that and how you implement that into your sessions, and different challenges. It might be maybe to the older players, you might set up the teams for 5-10 minutes. You've got one team who's going to set up a bit more of a low block, and this is more for the older age, obviously. How can you get your maybe team to look to penetrate or create space or movement to break that down? Because we all know the game and different teams you play, different formations, you're not going to play the same team. When we now look to maybe looking to challenge players more into the match day, and this is something to think about, is I'm not saying this weekend you go and change every player into different positions, but maybe start to think about the players that you have in your environment, what their kind of skill set is, and maybe look at the principles and play and go, what do my players maybe need to get better at, and what position might get those outcomes? So, Pat, I know you have a really good story about when you played your centre forward.
It's my son actually. Yeah, so
my
so my son's in an academy, and he plays centre forward for an under-12 team. And in the last probably 18 months, he's really enjoyed playing up front with his back to play, and he's done all right. He's really enjoyed it, scoring a few goals and stuff like that. But I know, looking at him, that he probably needs to play in different positions. So I was trying to have that conversation with him. We went to a review the other day and we spoke to the coach, and the coach actually brought it up about him playing different positions. And I said it would be really good for him to play midfield or at the back, because he's got to see the game in different ways, where if he's in midfield, the game's all around him, and it will really improve him in his awareness and receiving skills, rather than just him staying up front and feel comfortable. And then he actually played the next 2 games in midfield and found it really tough. And I had the conversation with him and said, like, you had a tough day today, didn't you? And like, he said, yeah. He said it was really tested, and he was a little bit down. But I said, look, this is really good. This is you're improving now, because you're finding it tough in that position where you found it really easy from. And he's really bought into it now. So it's just that communication. And I think what we do as parents, we want to, I know we like parents want to obviously win games, and you want to see him do well, but in another way, you have to see them struggle a little bit and see if they can work it out and find solutions. And hopefully in 6-12 months time, he can play up front, but he can go in midfield, and it's improved him as a player. So yeah, that was
do you see with that part, how important is it then for almost the coaches out there for going and almost playing a player in a different position for a set period of time, instead of going 1 week they're going to play up front, next week they're going to play left back, then right back. I tell you what, they're going to have a stint in goals. Like, how important is it to have that that continuity and consistency of letting them play a position for a little bit of time as well?
Yeah, and I think it's really important. I think you're right in what you say is, rather than moving around each week, just say, look, for the next month, you're going to play in midfield, or you're going to play at the back, or you're going to play right back, or whatever it may be. And these are the reasons why. And we think it would really help your development. And you're going to struggle, and you're going to find it tough. But we're going to here to support you and help you. And then you communicate with the parents as well. So if everybody's on board, I think it's really good. And all of a sudden, you just add in another bit of armor to your game, really, where you can then find different ways of improving your game to then be an asset that if you have to play in there, or you can go up front, you can do that. Or it's just a way of knowing as you go through the age groups, there's actually that's probably not for him, but this position might be for her or him. And I think that's really important. And not just looking at the scoreline every week, just looking at the development of the players is really important, because you've also got to look at what their strengths are and where their areas for development are, and where on the pitch do we see that development. So they might have a real big physicality challenge, whether they're small or big, or they're quick or not so quick, and then where is best suited for them, or where they've always played out wide. Well, even if they're fast, let's put them in the middle and really improve them technically, or give them different challenges where scanning is going to become a major part.
And then if we need to bring it back down because players might not understand it, we can do. And that kind of goes back to some of the comments I saw earlier, that if the players aren't maybe getting it, do we need to move on? Do we need to build up? Or do we need to kind of stay where we are and continue to build different foundations? I think the other one as well is definitely try and give them the freedom. So looking at Pat sessions, obviously there was different constraints, but actually they had a lot of freedom to play, a lot of freedom to try different things, see lots of different pictures, lots of different scenarios. The other one as well we need to also remember is to give players time as well. We can't expect players from one session to completely, they've got it, they know how to penetrate, let's move on, we're going to move on to the next one. It takes time to kind of retain that kind of that skill or something that they've done. You know, players and maybe especially younger kids, you've got to think about their week and they're in school, they're learning so much, and then when you go back to the session, they might have forgot it, so that can go back to repeating that kind of session and giving them that time to develop. And we all know players develop at different rates and obviously learn and absorb information in different ways. And I think the other one as well we touched on about is giving them solutions as well. So we want to allow players to make their own decisions on the pitch, but we might have to drop in different solutions to support them as well. And like we spoke about earlier, it might be you let them play first and then you drip feed different solutions and let them play again. Or you might give them solutions to begin with and then allow players to play in the game. So allow them to make their own decisions as well.